The grave problem with Europe in mid-century was its rejection of the idea of race and its willingness to accept miscegenation. Greece, Rome, and France declined because they did not appreciate the value of pure Nordic blood. They prostituted the value of race and permitted alien blood to take over, bit by bit, until the Nordic blood was so diluted that it could not recognize its own worth and importance. Race, for Houston Chamberlain, was an artificial creation. One begins with good stock from whatever source, then one keeps the pure stock from outside contamination, while mixing it thoroughly over a period of generations. The race that results from this process may be good or bad. One cannot predict it because it is the end product, not the components that count. One should begin with superior stock, but Chamberlain admits that he cannot tell good raw material from bad and has no idea where one gets the good stock. The term Aryan applies to any superior race, irrespective of color, facial structure, body shape, hair coloration, and so on. The one Aryan seeks out his superior counterpart in other lands and recognizes him not from his physical appearance, but from the nature of his civilization and culture. Even if one could prove that there had never been such an Aryan race anywhere, it was Chamberlain's intent that there would be one in the future. An Aryan race is thus produced in Chamberlain, much like the hit and miss breeding of horses. One is never quite certain what the winning stallion will look like, but it can be bred selectively from good stock. No two superior horses need look alike. In Rosenberg, race is an eternally existing thing. A Nordic man is an eternal symbol of racial superiority and cannot be bred from Chinese, Hebrews, Indians, Arabs, Mediterranean, or Alpine types. He will have no true counterpart anywhere else in the world. Should he disappear into a racial melting pot, he could never be refabricated out of the mongrel product that the interbreeding of races produces. The Nordic type predominated in most European civilizations and even on some Near East and Eastern cultures. The Varangian overlords developed Kievan civilization in the Ukraine until subdued by the Mongols. Then the race was absorbed by that of another alien blood. The Nordic man appeared as the leaders of pre-Socratic Greece, but the subsequent race mixing with Alpine, Mediterranean, and Asiatic types ended their rule, and Greece declined. The Nordic type also developed true Roman civilization, but was absorbed by the Near Eastern Jewish Etruscan races. Rome then fell, but the Nordic blood was so dissipated that it made little difference. The die was cast once Roman granted citizenship to non-Nordics, said Rosenberg. The Nordic race once existed in Eastern Europe, but here again it was intermixed with a variety of other races, including Magyars, Slavs, Mongols, Jews, and so on. If the Germans had survived in our time as overlords without mixing, then this area might have continued to have a civilization as it had earlier in a world history. But Rosenberg believed that it was lost, and the area could only be used as land suitable for depopulation and resettlement. France, too, had a Germanic population. Wars ravaged the race, and resettlement was accomplished by Alpine Mediterranean types, along with later waves of blacks, Jews, and other racial groups. France was of particular concern to Rosenberg, for he saw it as the archetype of what it was in the 1920s happening to Germany. If the trend was not reversed, the chaos that marked France would be marked also of Germany and Great Britain. France, too, had a Germanic population. Wars ravaged the race, and resettlement was accomplished by Alpine Mediterranean types, along with the later waves of blacks, Jews, and other racial groups. France was of particular concern to Rosenberg, for he saw it as an archetype of what was, in the 1920s, happening to Germany. If the trend was not reversed, the chaos that marked France would be an earmark also of Germany and Great Britain. England was at the same crossroads as Germany, and it too had to decide how to pilot its future course. It was not a lost cause, as was France. There was thus a natural racial alliance possible with Britain. Should Germany and Great Britain lose the battle for racial protection, all should be lost for all time. We must bear in mind that substantial difference between Rosenberg and Chamberlain. In the latter, the race could emerge anew at any time. Regeneration was possible within any civilization that would isolate itself for generations and permit the pot to boil. In Rosenberg, race was a one-time event. It cannot spontaneously regenerate out of racial chaos. So long as a basic Nordic racial group remained mostly intact, it could renew its racial consciousness and its commitment to its supreme values. It could repopulate areas lost to other races. It could struggle upward under the leadership of individuals capable of forming types, but it could not remake itself, as it were, ex nihilo. As the proverb suggests, one cannot make a purse from a sow's ear, nor a race from a group of mongrels. Alien, inferior blood could not, for Rosenberg, be purged from the mongrel groups, and a purified race produced, as might be done in cattle barns or horse stables, as in Chamberlain. Up to a point, the Nordic race could absorb a certain amount of alien blood. It could tolerate more than most races because its racial will was stronger than other racial wills. Its inner light, its guiding principles, and its supreme values could protect against a moderate incursion of alien blood. But once the point wherein a society it overwhelmed is reached, we will have to come to the end of the line, and there can be no salvation. The end of mankind and history will be at hand. There is also an anti-race. The existence of race necessarily suggests that possibility. The anti-race is to be found in the Hebrews. The Nordic race was creative, incisive, reflective, open, honest, and loyal. The anti-race, in Rosenberg, is precisely the opposite. The origins are shrouded not in myths, but in lies. It begins with the idea of creation of the world out of nothing, and it ended with nothing that is human, that is racially oriented. It taught that it is God, Jehovah, Yahweh, that created a superior race to serve him, and he cheated other races to serve the Jews. It taught a God who created a perfect world, and who then constantly intervenes to alter what he created. All intervention benefits the Hebrews, that God took from other peoples and gave to the Jews, as in the case of the Promised Land, which was already populated by other nations. That occurred despite the constant betrayal of Jehovah by his people from start to finish, from the Exodus to the occupation of the new homeland. It was a race that taught nothing of freedom, but rather extolled the values of slavery. It taught lies, as in the case where Jacob told the Pharaoh that his wife was his sister. It was a race that denied others participation in their religion, saying that only the Jews could be the people of God. It was a race that taught punishment without crime, as in the case of Esau and Isaac. And it taught crime without punishment, and in the case of stealing others' land, without claim, justification, or compensation. These were among the charges Rosenberg threw at the ancient Hebrew anti-race. Since the destruction of their temple in Jerusalem, the Jews have wandered as parasites on the rest of the Western world. They have, according to the myth of the 20th century, contributed nothing while sapping the wealth and strength of their host nations. There is no symbiotic relationship established wherein each party provides something useful to the other. It is purely a parasitic relationship that takes everything but gives nothing. The anti-race is of Asiatic origin and learned there the values of magic and ritual in controlling others. It devised such a magic system within its religion. Theology proved to be useful to the powerful elements in keeping control over the masses, and it was only natural that, through such perfected magic, it expanded its control over others. Christianity, as taught in St. Paul and those under his Jewish spell, offered a mechanism for worldwide domination. Like Houston Chamberlain, Rosenberg insisted that there was not one shred of true historical evidence that Jesus was Jewish or that his true message was come down to us today. There are bits and pieces spread throughout the New Testament that suggest that Jesus was a Nordic figure capable of forming types whose true message can, in the large, be discovered and thus related to classic Germanic values. All else is the magical production of the same Jewish Middle Eastern Babylonian theology that subverted Rome and controlled the Hebrew masses. The basic assumption Rosenberg made is as follows. Jesus taught an Aryan pride in self and in self becoming its potential. He had a justified anger against those who would prostitute the idea of God. He wanted to move the race ahead, excluding those of alien groups. The message was not understood by or understandable to those to whom it was delivered because they had never been free. Jesus had tried to teach them that the kingdom of God was within man, that is, to be discovered inwardly through a right ordering of values. There was not truth to external magic, but he made the fundamental mistake of attracting the disciples by using magical tricks. These they understood, but could not rise above that level. St. Paul stumbled on what was but one of many non-Hebrew, non-Roman religious sects, and saw the opportunity to alter what was. The followers were totally bewildered by promises of inner enlightenment and the spiritual inner awakening Jesus promised. They were probably Jews, Rosenberg reasoned, and thus unable to understand anything but magic and material, external things. Paul gambled on the new theology by subtly twisting the words of Jesus. He could make him the Messiah who taught submission to the Jewish theology. Judaism would remain the religion of the initiates, of the Hebrews. They would control the Gentiles by controlling their religion. After all, the time was right to offer non-Hebrews some sort of opportunity to partake of the Jewish vision of an afterlife. Only the initiates, the Jews, would know that all was lies and deceit. Simultaneously, the Aryans became a threat, for they taught the truer version of Christ's message. That sect had some Asiatic overtappings, but it was fundamentally non-Jewish. Its theology had to be altered so that it appeared to be ridiculous, and then it could be, and was, suppressed. Still, some of the Aryan heresy survived, if again in an imperfect form. The Roman Church grew, but under non-Hebrew leadership. The leaders, after Peter learned how to continue to build a magical system that became a great influence over the masses, Jewish Christian theology, as found in Paul, remained useful. In short, the church beat the Jews at their own game and with their own instrument, but in doing so, succumbed to the Jewish philosophy. The anti-race was denied full control of its mass-controlled religion. The perplexing problem remained. The Jews were Christ killers, but they were also the chosen people. St. Paul was the Jew, Saul, and he wrote to the Hebrews, but the Jews were still not Christian. Nonetheless, the Jews were still the center of history, quite clearly. They were neither part of Christendom nor wholly heathen. The Church of the Middle Ages did not choose to exterminate the Jews, but neither did it tolerate them in the cities. It confined them to ghettos, and it limited them to certain professions. Anti-Christian writings and other attacks on Christianity were attributed to the Jews. Still, the scholastics and the popes would not accept a decisive course of action against them. The ghetto mentality and separatism of the Middle Ages remained in much of Central Europe through the interwar period. Liberation was permitted, and the Jews were emancipated. Religious anti-Semitism was nearly at an end. What ensued was political anti-Semitism. Once Christianity was discovered to have Jewish roots, and this was cast against the race, anti-race dichotomy, anti-Semitism was viewed more broadly. It was essentially unimportant that the Jews killed Christ. It was important that the Jews sought, in one way or another, to dominate the Nordic race and the West generally. The Jews, Rosenberg concluded, had come, by the beginning of the 19th century, to realize that Christianity had failed as a tool for the control of the West. A new tool was needed. Indeed, two seemingly desperate tools emerged simultaneously: capitalism and Marxism. The one had Gentile origins, but could be manipulated by Jewish capital. The other was merely a form of state capitalism, controlled still by vested Jewish interests. It mattered little which one triumphed in any given country. In Russia, it was Marxism, and in most other areas, it was capitalism, but were merely two sides of the same coin. Both communist Marxism and capitalism were post-industrial ideologies. Both assumed the mass concentration of labor and industry in large urban areas. Both were anti-folk and internationalist in outlook, but were only falsely nationalistic. Both assumed the continued existence of economic man in contradiction to whole, inwardly directed man. Both were materialistic and anti-spiritual in values and in preferred lifestyle. Neither gave man what he needed, a feeling of belonging that could come only through, with, and by nationalistic, folkish-based, racially sound, anti-materialistic ideology.